Stand on square one. Nobody comes past you until I've touched them. You're the door now. They're saying 20 plus. We don't have 20 beds. You don't need 20 beds, 20 spaces, and one order they go in. I have that. It's on the floor. How are you doing this? One at a time, in the right order.
Major, I know that walk.
You've got me mixed up. Save your breath.
No, ma'am, I don't.
Nobody at Mercy Vista Regional knew why the night nurse laid out the supply carts in that strange grid. 4 rows, silver tape on the floor, each square numbered in her small square hand. They thought it was a quirk. They thought she was tidy in the way lonely people are tidy, filling the empty hours with order because order asked nothing back. The day charge called it a waste of tape. A young nurse named Ruby thought it was almost pretty, the way the fluorescent light caught the silver lines. None of them asked. And in 4 hours, when the sky over the ridge turned the color of a struck match and the first ambulances came screaming down the grade with ash on their windshields, every square in that grid would have a body in it, and the woman who drew it would be the only person in the building who already knew which losses to take. Her name was Celine Marsh, though almost no one at Mercy Vista called her anything but Nights. She came in when the building was quietest, tied her hair back without a mirror, and moved through the halls with a stillness that made the other nurses uneasy without knowing why. She took the shifts no one wanted, the long dark ones, the holidays, the stretch from 11 to 7 when the world narrows to a hallway and a hum. What none of them knew, what she had gone to some trouble to make sure they didn't know, was that Celine Marsh had once worn oak leaves on her collar and had kept people alive in places that did not appear on any map. That stillness of hers was not emptiness. It was the quiet of someone who had already met the worst thing and decided to keep working anyway. She had reasons to stay small. Everyone at Mercy Vista had a story they carried to work and set down at the door, but Celine carried hers all the way to the bedside and never once set it down. His name had been Delgado. He'd been 19, and he'd been hers to keep breathing. And the day the truck rolled up out of the wadi, she had made a choice. 4 blankets, 4 men, and only 2 hands. And she had chosen the 2 who lived and lost the one who didn't. That was the arithmetic of it. That was what they never told you when they trained you to be fast and calm and right. Sometimes fast and calm and right still left a boy in the dirt with your handprint on his chest. She had come home. She had let the rank fall off her like a coat she was ashamed to be caught wearing. And she had decided, without ever saying the words even to herself, that she would spend the rest of her life being invisible, because invisible people did not get to decide who lived. So she drew her grid, and she stalked her carts, and she was invisible. That was the plan. The charge nurse that season was Britt Holloway, and Britt ran the floor the way frightened people run things. Tight, loud, and certain. She wasn't cruel. That mattered later, when people wanted to make her the villain, and she wouldn't fit the shape. Britt was simply a woman who had reached the ceiling of what she knew, and was terrified every single shift that today would be the day the ceiling showed. She'd seen Celine's calm and read it as a challenge. She'd seen the grid and read it as a rebuke. "We don't have room for artwork," she'd said once, towing the silver tape. "When it's busy, that's just something to trip on." "Understood," Celine had said, and left it exactly where it was. The night it happened, the fire had been a rumor for 3 days. A glow behind the eastern hills, a smell that got into the coffee, a fine gray dust that settled on the parking lot and would not brush off. Ruby came in at 7 with ash already speckling her windshield and said the highway patrol had turned people back at the county line. By 9, the wind had come up out of the north, and the rumor stopped being a rumor. By 10, the radio in the break room said the word evacuation, and then it said the word overrun, and then a nurse manager none of them had ever seen at night came onto the floor with her face gone white and said the 2 words that changed everything. Mass casualty. Britt's voice climbed. She started calling names, calling for the disaster binder, calling the house supervisor, and the binder was 3 years out of date, and the supervisor didn't answer, and the emergency room was already full because it had been full since dinner. Celine watched her for the length of one breath. She watched a good nurse begin to drown in a room that still had its lights on, and she felt the old, cold thing move down her spine, the thing she had promised herself she would never let move again. "Where do you want the burns?" Celine asked, quiet, just for Britt. "I don't, they're saying 20 plus. We don't have 20 beds." "You don't need 20 beds," Celine said. "You need 20 spaces and one order they go in. I have that, it's on the floor. Let me run the intake and you run the phones. You'll save more that way." For a second, Britt looked at her, and everything unspoken between them stood up in the room. The tape, the evenness, the sense Britt had carried for months that this quiet woman knew something she didn't. And Britt, to her enormous and lasting credit, was more frightened of the wrong thing than of the right one. "Run it," she said. "Go." So Celine went to the doors, and the doors opened, and the fire came in. They came in on gurneys and in the arms of firefighters and on their own 2 feet with their shirts burned to their backs. They came in coughing black. They came in silent, which was worse. The first ambulance brought 4, and the second brought 3, and behind them the bay filled with headlights. The parking lot smelled like the inside of a chimney. Somewhere a car alarm was going and would go for hours, because no one had time to turn it off. Ruby froze in the doorway with a blood pressure cuff in her hand and no idea what to do with it, and later she would say that the thing that unfroze her was not a shout. It was the sight of the night nurse walking into all of it without hurrying. "Ruby." Celine didn't raise her voice, and that was the strange part, that in all that noise her voice carried because it wasn't fighting the noise. "Stand on square 1. Nobody comes past you until I've touched them. You're the door now. Can you be the door?" "I can be the door," Ruby said, and something in her steadied that would never fully unsteady again. What Celine did next, the doctors would ask about for weeks. It had a name, though she didn't say the name out loud. A mass burn triage protocol. The ugly, beautiful math of it. The system she'd run in a tent in the worst week of her life and sworn never to run again. She moved down the incoming like water finding level. She didn't stop to treat. That was the thing the civilians couldn't stomach. It was also the thing that saved them. She didn't stop. She touched a throat, a chest, watched for the rise and fall. She read the burn by its color and its silence, and she assigned, square by square. The ones who could wait went to the far rows. The ones who couldn't went to the near ones. The ones past saving, and there were 2, and she would carry their faces the rest of her life the way she carried Delgado's, went to the quiet square by the wall where someone could hold a hand while it happened, because that mattered too, and no one else in that building knew yet that it mattered. She ran out of tag cards in the first 10 minutes. The disaster kit had 6. So she reached into her scrub pocket for the black marker she always carried and never explained, and she began writing the triage numbers on skin. On a forearm here, on the back of a hand there, on one man's collarbone, because his arms were both too badly burned and she needed somewhere the ink would hold. She wrote fast, and she wrote clear, and behind her the squares filled. 1, 2, 3, 4, and the grid that Britt had called artwork became the only thing standing between 22 burned human beings and pure chaos. "How are you doing this?" Britt said once, passing her, phone jammed to her ear, and it wasn't a challenge anymore. It was something closer to prayer. "One at a time," Celine said, in the right order, and moved on. By midnight, they had turned the recovery bay into a burn ward that no textbook would recognize, and every combat medic would. Sheets that had been white were gray at the edges where ash came off the patients, faster than anyone could wipe it. The whole floor smelled of smoke and saline, and the particular sweetness of burned skin that nobody warns you about. Ruby held her post on square 1 and grew up about a decade an hour. A donated case of water had come in on one of the fire trucks, and Celine made sure a bottle got pressed into every conscious hand. She knew, from the tent, from the wadi, from 100 nights she'd tried to forget, that a person who can hold a bottle of water can hold on to the belief that someone means for them to live. She almost didn't notice the Marine. He'd come in on the 3rd wave, square 9, far row, which meant she'd looked at him once and decided he could wait, and being decided about was a thing this man had strong feelings about. He was big and burned along one whole side and stubborn as a fence post, and when she finally came back around to him, he was watching her with an expression she hadn't seen aimed at herself in years. Recognition, not of her face, of the way she moved. His name was Reyes. She got that much off his mumble as she checked the burn along his ribs. He wouldn't stop looking at her. She'd learned to work under a stare. She didn't look up. And then, in a voice wrecked by smoke but absolutely certain, the man on square 9 said the word that split her life clean in half. Major. Her hands did not stop. That was training too, but something behind her ribs went very still, the way the whole desert used to go still, before a thing you couldn't take back. Easy, she said. Save your breath. I know that walk, Reyes said. Kandahar, the medic tent. You did this. I watched you do this exact thing with a whole convoy, and I was the one you put in the back row, and I was so damn mad you put me in the back. He coughed, and it cost him, because I knew it meant I was gonna live. You only put the ones who'd live in the back, Major Marsh. I never forgot your walk. The bay had not gone quiet. A bay like that does not go quiet, but a pocket of quiet opened around the two of them anyway. Ruby heard it from square 1. Britt heard it from the phones and turned. And Celine Marsh, who had spent 3 years being nobody so that she would never again have to be the one who chose, stood in the fluorescent light with a marker in her hand and triage numbers written up her own forearm where she'd run out of anywhere else, and felt the coat she'd thrown off settle back onto her shoulders whether she wanted it or not. You've got me mixed up, she said, but it was gentle, and it was a lie, and everyone within 10 feet knew it. No, ma'am, Reyes said, and he tried to lift the arm that still worked, and she understood with a lurch of dread what he meant to do. No, ma'am, I don't. Don't, she said. You'll tear the graft site. Reyes, do not. He got his hand to his brow anyway, burned, shaking, flat on his back on square 9 with the whole ward watching. The Marine held the salute, and held it, and would not let it fall. And here is the thing about a room full of frightened, exhausted, ordinary people in the middle of the worst night of their working lives. They know the truth when it walks past them. A hush went down the rows like a hand smoothing a sheet. A firefighter by the door came to attention without deciding to. Ruby put her hand over her mouth. And Britt Holloway, loud, tight, certain Britt, who had spent a whole season believing this quiet woman was a threat to her. Britt looked at the numbers written on Celine's skin and the grid on the floor that had saved every soul she'd been too scared to save alone, and understood, all at once and far too late to have said it sooner, exactly who had been working her night shift. Celine lowered her eyes first. She reached up, and with a gentleness that had nothing military in it at all, she brought the Marine's hand down and folded it against his chest where it wouldn't tear. At ease, she said, so softly it was almost only breath. You did good. You held on. I've got the room now. Yes, ma'am, Reyes said, and closed his eyes and let her. She worked until the sun came up gray through the smoke. Twice in that long grade toward morning, the room asked of her the thing it had been built to ask, and twice she gave what she had to the square by the wall. The first was a woman whose name nobody ever learned, and Celine held her hand and did not look away, because looking away was the one mercy she had never allowed herself. The second was younger, and stubborn about living the way the young are, and when he finally let go, Celine stood over him a moment longer than the math allowed, and let herself feel the whole weight of the one she couldn't keep. Then she wiped her hands and went back to the ones she could. She did not stop being invisible so much as she stopped being able to hide, which is a different thing, and a harder one. When the surge finally broke near dawn, and the county sent buses, and the burn transfers began rolling out to the city centers, Mercy Vista Regional had taken in 22 and lost 2, the 2 by the wall, the 2 she'd known at the door, and every review that came after, every quiet man in a suit with a clipboard, arrived at the same number and could not make it smaller. 20 saved. On a night the building was never built to survive, in a grid of silver tape somebody had almost peeled up for being in the way. Britt found her by the supply carts at the end of it, both of them hollow-eyed, ash in the creases of their hands. For a while, neither said anything. Then Britt said, "I read your name wrong. For months. I want you to know I know that. You ran those phones all night," Celine said. "You held the outside world off my floor so I could work. That's not nothing, Britt. That's most of it. You saved this hospital." No. Celine looked down the rows, at the empty squares, at the two that had never emptied the right way. "I ran a system. The system saves people. I just remembered it." She was quiet a moment. "And you let me run it when you didn't have to. When it would have been easier to keep me small, that took more than you think." Later they'd tell the story around, the way stories go around a floor, and it would grow and shrink and change hands. But the version that stuck was the one Britt herself started telling, because Britt made sure of it. She saved the room, people would say about Celine, and Britt would always add the part that mattered to her, the part that was her own small redemption, folded into someone else's. "She saved the room, and she let me help." We spend so much of our lives certain that the quiet ones beside us have nothing under the surface, that the tidy nurse with her strange tape is only tidy, that the woman who takes the shifts nobody wants, takes them because she has nowhere better to be. And then the ash comes down on the windshields and we find out what people were carrying all along. Some promises don't shout. They wait, sometimes for years, in the back of a burned Marine's memory, in a walk he never forgot. And when the fire comes, they stand up in a fluorescent hallway and salute. They asked Celine, in the weeks after, whether she wanted the recognition, the letter, the ceremony, the photograph with the county board. She said no, and they let it be. What she asked for instead surprised them. She asked to keep the nights. Just for a while, she said. She asked to stay on schedule, on her own floor, in her own quiet, and they gave it to her. Because after a night like that, you give a person the small thing they ask for. But there was one change, and Celine didn't make it. Ruby did. A few days after, on a slow, bright afternoon with the smoke finally lifting off the ridge, the young nurse came in early with a roll of good silver tape, the permanent kind, and got down on her knees on the recovery bay floor, and traced every line of that grid until it would never come up again. 4 rows, squares numbered in a careful hand. When Britt asked her why, Ruby didn't look up from her work. "So nobody ever calls it artwork again," she said. "So it's just here. So the next time, whoever's standing where I was standing already knows where to put people." Celine found it on her way in that night, the grid made permanent, the light catching the silver the way it had the very first shift. She stood over it a long moment. Then she reached into her scrub pocket, and she took out the marker, and on the square by the wall, the quiet one, the one where you go to hold a hand, she wrote a single word, small and square in her own hand, and never told anyone what it said. But Ruby saw it once. Later, when the light was right, it was a name, Delgado. And beside it, in letters even smaller, so no one would think it was for show, still counting,